Archibald Leach, better known as Cary Grant, is widely considered one of the greatest movie stars of all time, and in this special video I'm going to say 12 Cary Grant films that I think everyone should go the way to watch. So without much further ado, I'm just going to get into it. I'm going to start off with The Awful Truth. So this is a kind of a screwball comedy of Cary Grant co-starring Irene Dunne. So they're this couple who break up and then they do everything they can to essentially scupper the other person's chances of romance. So it's very, very funny, very, very humorous. And essentially, if you've seen Hitchcock's Mr. and Mrs. Smith, this is just a much, much, much better version of that. It's really effective, comedy's really on point, and you'll have a great time watching it, in my opinion. Obviously, kind of early, kind of 1930s Cary Grant, towards the end of the 1930s, so he'd had done a few movies by this point, but this is when he starts to become kind of considered to be a real romantic leading man. Secondly, I'm going to go with Only Angels Have Wings. So this is the Howard Hawks films, co-starring Jean Arthur, the great Jean Arthur. And this is kind of a wartime pilot kind of film. So some brilliant flying sequences in this, but the main thing is the romance at the centre again between Cary Grant and Jean Arthur, and it absolutely lives up to the billing. It's also really kind of, it deals with death and grief in a really, really kind of refreshing way. Like, it doesn't pull its punches. It is quite a sad, emotional film at times, but it's also quite willing to go to these kind of, again, these places where maybe some other films maybe wouldn't. And then also, like I said, at the centre of the film, it's got a brilliant kind of two brilliant performances from Cary Grant and Jean Arthur. So absolutely love this film, one of my favourites of the 1930s, and I would have highly recommend it to anyone who wants to watch it. Next up, The Talk of the Town. This is also co-starring Cary Grant and Jean Arthur. So this is them. Cary Grant is a criminal who escapes prison, so he's accused of kind of pulling off these a bunch of murders. We know he didn't do it. We find out very early on that he's actually innocent of these crimes, but he goes kind of back to his hometown to kind of lay low and to ask his old kind of friend Jean Arthur for help. She's obviously reluctant at first, but then it's about kind of, does she get involved? And there's also this kind of love triangle of this professor who is kind of embroiled in it as well. He's in love with Jean Arthur, and he also has a bit of competition now with Cary Grant, who he obviously doesn't know it's this escaped fugitive. So it's quite funny, but it's also quite moving again at times, and yeah, just very much recommend it. Again, kind of the screwball narrative, just along the screwball kind of comedic genre, but again, highly recommend it. He had a very, very deft comedic touch, Cary Grant, and this is another example of that. Next up, Bringing Up Baby. So yeah, his partnership, his on-screen collaborations with Katharine Hepburn are quite famous. One of the greatest screen, again, collaborations of all time. This is the first of three. I'm going to mention all three because they are all really that good. Hijinks ensue is all I'll say, but it's very, very funny. You've got two comedic geniuses like Cary Grant and like Katharine Hepburn. Of course, it's going to be some funny stuff in there, and it very much lives up to its billing as kind of one of the great screwball comedies. I'm going to also again mention Holiday, which is the second kind of collaboration from them. This is Katharine Hepburn plays kind of an upper class socialite in this, and Cary Grant is kind of a more working class guy who falls in love with her sister. And then so they're obviously entering each other's orbit. She is quite fond of him, but not in necessarily a romantic way, or is she? Because yeah, as the film wears on, she kind of admires his kind of plucky underdog spirit, his willingness to go out and do stuff for himself and not just necessarily fall into the comfortable traps of, I'm going to marry this rich girl and then have a comfortable life. He actually wants to go and do stuff for himself, see the world, etc. And she is quite enamored with that kind of idea, and she very much kind of starts to slowly fall for him. And then the third and final collaboration between the two of them is also co-starring Jimmy Stewart. It is The Philadelphia Story. It is an absolute classic. Again, one of the great love triangles ever put to film, and it's just, if you haven't seen The Philadelphia Story, I'll just shut up right now. Just go and watch it. It's amazing. After this video, of course. But yeah, go and watch it. It's an amazing film. Great love triangle. Very, very, very funny. Three iconic performances. So just, yeah, go and watch it. It's brilliant. Next up, His Girl Friday. He plays this newspaper executive whose ex-flame is going to go and get married and leave the newspaper business. But yeah, he maybe, because she's such a good journalist, he isn't quite happy about this, so he concocts more and more stuff for her to do to try and stave off the inevitable. But then the question is, can they actually rekindle their romance through this kind of partnership? Because they did essentially drive each other absolutely crazy. because of their kind of workaholicness, but they are also both brilliant journalists and they are deeply in love with each other, so it's whether they can actually overcome these differences and kind of reunite. Very, very, very funny stuff. The dialogue in this just goes an absolute mile a minute, and yeah, brilliant, brilliant screwball comedy once again. Yeah, another screwball comedy, Arsenic and Low Lace. So this is Cary Grant again, just at his absolute comedic best. So his two aunts are, yeah, they're quite homicidal maniacs, but they're quite sweet old ladies as well, which is quite funny. This is based on a play, and again, the dialogue just goes an absolute mile a minute. And so it's got some really funny gags in there. There's a Boris Karloff lookalike who, yeah, is very much intended to be like that. I won't spoil exactly how, but that's very much intentional. It's brilliant, but brilliantly funny. It's very much, again, there's a gag a minute. You're not going to be able to kind of, you'll be laughing at one joke and probably have missed three others. Next up, I'm going to go with a couple of Hitchcock collaborations. So there's obviously a bunch of Hitchcock collaborations. I'm just going to pick two. I'm not going to pick them all because I want to try and just pick the two that I think people should definitely go out their way to watch. So the first one is Notorious. This is again a romantic drama / thriller, co-starring the great Ingrid Bergman, who's obviously in Casablanca as well behind me. But yeah, they have a sizzling romantic chemistry, as often tended to happen with Cary Grant. He had great chemistry with all of his kind of co-leads or romantic interests, but maybe no more so than in Notorious, I'd say. But yeah, another example of Cary Grant's brilliant kind of romantic chemistry in this sense, in a more dramatic way than maybe we've seen in a lot of films so far that I referenced. And the second Hitchcock collaboration that I'm going to mention is, of course, North by Northwest. This is again a brilliant kind of romantic chemistry between him and Cary Grant and Eva Marie Saint in this one. So again, you'll never guess, he's the Hitchcock film, so of course he's accused of a crime he didn't commit. So he goes on the run. He's this ad salesman. He goes on the run for being this like super international spy. Got this amazing kind of closing sequence set at Mount Rushmore, of course. But yeah, it's a film all about, he's obviously in his 50s at this point, Cary Grant, but yeah, it's very much still a film that relies on his kind of swagger and his charisma and his innate kind of, just his ability to hold the screen and command your attention. He has such a screen presence. Sticking in the late 50s, An Affair to Remember. So this is again a romantic drama, really quite touching romantic drama actually, especially towards the end. Again, much more dramatic than maybe some of his earlier kind of 30s and 40s films of these screwball comedies. Much more dramatic, kind of a love epic in a way, of these two people who fall in love on this ship. And finally, a bit of a comedic caper. This is Charade. So co-starring obviously the great Audrey Hepburn in her own right. So obviously because there's an age gap in this, Cary Grant kind of is well aware of that. So he didn't necessarily want it to be a case of the older guy pursuing the younger woman. So he flipped on its head. So she's very much pursuing him romantically, Audrey Hepburn. Quite the comedic shenanigans going on at the centre of this film. Very, very funny. You've obviously got two brilliant comedic performers in Audrey Hepburn and Cary Grant, so of course there will be. And it's got, again, an iconic ending. A lot of people think this is a Hitchcock film, but actually isn't. I actually thought that for a long time before I watched it. Just assumed because of the kind of synopsis of it, but it's actually not. It's directed by Stanley Donen, and it's well worth going out of the way to watch. It's a fantastic comedic caper, like I said, and definitely one of his great later performances of his career. This is from the 60s, so again one of his best kind of performances later on in his life, and well worth a watch. So that's 12 Cary Grant films that I think everyone should watch. Definitely one of the great movie stars of all time. And yeah, I'm sure if you haven't seen any of his films or many of his films, there's a bunch that I think people will like. And thanks for watching, everyone.